Here we go. We're talking home finance. There's so much that I could talk about, but I will definitely try to talk about the most important things, right? So at the front page, I always like to give you an overview. Okay, so we'll definitely start talking about payments. Monthly, we're going to focus exclusively on monthly payments in this class, even though it could be bi-weekly, it could be semi-monthly, you name it, we're going to focus on monthly. The point is still being made with that. And then we're going to talk about interest. Okay. There's total interest versus first month. And then we have the difference between principal and interest, right? Principal versus interest. We're going to talk about that, right? The principal is the amount that you borrowed and you're trying to pay that off. Okay, I'm going to make it a little darker. I think that's easier to see. Principal versus interest. So the principal is what you're trying to pay off. So your payment has a principal portion and an interest portion in it. It's just like vehicle finance. So when you make monthly payments towards anything, some of it, the institution that's financing it, so it could be Canadian Tire, could be Walmart, like any of those stores, like if they have a payment plan, they're taking some interest and then they take the rest to actually pay off that big sum you owe them, which is the big principal. Okay, and so we're going to talk about that again and again. We're going to talk about how to decrease total interest paid. And if you still remember vehicle finance, there was a few things that you can do to pay less interest overall, okay, in the long run. And I like to talk about it straight up front. A strategy that I would recommend you do when you come to the point. It doesn't necessarily just have to be for a mortgage. Mortgages are just big loans towards real estate. Okay, it's the same thing. Loans for a car, loans for a house, they're the same. They operate the same way. It's just like mortgage is the name we give for a loan that goes towards real estate. Okay, and so this is a strategy that you can apply. So let's say you get your first house, you get your mortgage, and you're being told that it's $800 bi-weekly over 20 years. So let's say you'll take 20 years to pay off their mortgage. Your banker types in all the information. Just when you're about to sign, they'll tell you, okay, sir, 800 or miss, right? $800 bi-weekly. That's your payment. Leave it like that. Don't say, oh, I want to pay more. Because when you sign that paper, you are now in a contract and you have to pay whatever you signed for. What you can do instead, this is very important. I learned this not too long ago, and I wish somebody would have told me right away or earlier in my life, right? Add a payment to it. Tell your banker, can I add a payment, like a separate payment that happens at the same time every 2 weeks of, let's say, $50, right? You add a payment. What does that do? Well, this extra payment that you make is all going, 100% of that is going towards the mortgage you're trying to pay off. Any additional payments you make on top of the minimum that you sign up for, so the $800, some of it goes to interest, some of it goes towards paying off your mortgage. But if you add a payment, anything you add goes straight towards the principal, which is pretty sweet, right? And you know, you might think, oh, it's only $50 bi-weekly. That's not much. Okay, was it a little blurry or is it too small? I will try to zoom in a bit. Let's see if that helps. Okay. Hope that helps, Kira. Um, but I don't know, even if you get a car, let's say you get your first car and your payment is like, I don't know, $200, $200 bi-weekly or whatever you're getting, maybe less. If you can tell your banker, you know, I want to make an extra $50 every 2 weeks towards it, you can sometimes shave off a year on your loan. Literally, like you can be done paying it off a year sooner and therefore pay less interest overall. Just because, and let's say you're now in a tight spot, right? You're on your own, you realize, you know, oh, I'm not making quite enough. You can always call and just, or call or email. I email my banker and just say, hey, can you cancel that second payment? Or I can actually go online and just do it myself. I can just cancel that second payment myself. I was told I can even add the extra payment as well. I've never looked into that, but this is huge. I don't know, I really like that idea because you can cancel it and just go back to 800 bi-weekly, no problem. But then if you do have some extra money, pay it off faster. It's huge. Like maybe I'll do an online calculator comparison with you um, to let you know how that works and how many years. On a mortgage, you could be shaving off a couple of years in a 20-year time frame. You could be shaving off, you could be done 5 years sooner by doing that, right? Because all of it goes towards the principal. Enough said. I think you get the point. And I just want to make sure you understand because these things sometimes are complicated, right? Especially banks, they don't always tell you everything. And not that they're necessarily mean, they're just like, you know, they deal with so many people. Some know a lot, some don't, right? And so you need to be educated. Education is power, right? If you know about what you're signing, you can ask the right questions and avoid um, difficult decisions down the road. Okay, so we're going to talk about buying versus renting. Buying a condo, should I buy a condo? Should I rent? What are the benefits? Both of them have advantages and disadvantages. Okay, I'm not going to tell you you should never rent or you should never buy. It is very dependent on your preference. Okay, I think I'm a little biased towards buying a house, but that's just because I've seen the potential and the benefits of buying a home, but it's not always easy and not everybody can afford it. Okay, so that's fine. Property taxes, we're going to talk about that in this unit. We're going to calculate them. Everybody that owns real estate, it could be a condo, it could be a house, it doesn't matter, you pay property taxes. I'll be back, I can't hear. Okay, do that. How about everybody else? Can you hear me? Just a couple you can just say yes. Yeah, okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, thank you. All right. Property taxes. Everybody pays property taxes. And let me tell you, it is very expensive. For my house, I'm paying probably in the $4,000 a year. Sorry, not a month. And that's like 400 bucks or so a month on property taxes. And that's huge. Nobody tells you that when you're about to buy it. You're like, oh, I just need to take care of the mortgage. No, there are property taxes. And yes, the government has said that they were going to shave off some of it, like the education portion of it. But governments always change and it could be reinstated, right? So, but it's still going to be a significant amount on your bill. So what does, like, property taxes, why do we pay that? Well, it goes towards roads. If they repair a street on your neighborhood, It's the property taxes that were collected. It goes towards schools. Any maintenance on buildings that need to be made, right? If they renovate anything, they have to redo the roof. It's all property taxes, right? It goes towards garbage collection. It goes towards maintenance. So if you're actually cutting grass, right? The city cuts grass, they remove snow, uh, they redo a playground, right? Like they upgrade it, anything like that. It all comes from property taxes. So you're wondering, like, where does that come from? It's not just from the taxes they collect from sales. It's property taxes. Every single property that's owned pays property taxes. And you might think, if I rent, I don't pay property taxes. You technically don't, but trust me, your landlord has built it into your rent. Okay, so you're not getting a statement from the city, pay us, but the landlord has to pay on that huge building, right? If it's a big complex, you're paying a lot of money on property taxes. So the landlord has that built into your payment. And property taxes, there are two factors that drive it. It's based on the value of the home, like how much is it worth, and location, right? Some areas of the city, it's more, some it's less. Like I have a friend that lives in Point Douglas. He pays, I think, just about $1,000 a year, and I pay about four, and we have about the same value home, which is huge. So if right, like areas do matter. Um, Here, additional costs. Okay, so there are additional costs. Some are ongoing. So there's two categories, ongoing and one time. So some additional costs that come with buying a home will be ongoing. Some are one time, right? So one time moving costs, right? Like you might have to hire a truck, or even if you hire, if you get some of your friends, you still have to pay, right, for their food and whatnot. There are expenses associated with moving. Um, there's also something called, mark my words, because if you're planning on buying a home, you need to know this. And we're going to talk about it again. It's called land transfer tax. Land transfer tax. So the city of Winnipeg charges every time properties change hands, they change owners. Every time they charge land transfer tax, which is sometimes thousands of dollars, depending on the value of your home. We're going to talk about that, right? So I always, it's always said, okay, if you, let's say you need to have a 5% down payment for your house, you still need about 2 to 3% for all the extra costs that will come with the transaction, right? So that is significant. So if you do 5%, actually you should be thinking 7 or 8 in total, right? So just keep that in mind. There's maintenance, especially if you own a home, right? There's preventative maintenance, and emergency. Emergency maintenance would be like emergency repairs, really. But these are the two categories, the two camps. So obviously, there are things we do to prevent major breakdowns. If you have a furnace, you should be changing it regularly. The filter, right? Sorry, not the furnace, the filter. Because if the filter is clogged, the fan is working extra hard to get that air through, so that's going to damage your furnace, right? So you got to inspect that, get a technician out every year or two to really check all the components. Might cost you $100, but then they might find that there's something that needs to be replaced, no big deal, right? Instead of paying thousands of dollars for a major breakdown. What does it say on the left arrow? Preventative. Yeah, I know. It kind of looks like, yeah, preventative maintenance. No problem. Um, so another thing, preventative maintenance, this is what you should do, especially if you live in an area where there's a lot of mature trees, where every fall there are a lot of leaves that fall off the trees, of course. If your eaves drops, right, the gutters, they call them, right, on the side of the house that collect the water, if they clog up, the spring melt is going to go into the eaves troughs and pour over, or it might actually find its way into your home, right? It's all built up with water and ice. You want to always keep those eaves troughs or gutters clean, right? That's preventative maintenance. Cleaning your windows, right? Uh, Actually, there are seams on your windows, rubber seals. If they build up with like dirt and moist, it's moist and dirt and it gets all brittle, it will damage your seal. So you want to clean your windows on a regular basis, not just for looks, but just to protect, right? Um, Sometimes if you have anything that is made out of wood outside your house, you need to check to make sure that nothing is rotting, right? Make sure that if it's rotting, you maybe cut some of it out or you repaint it or you do something to protect the wood finish, right? And all of those things, that all deals with preventative maintenance, right? To prevent major damage to your house. If there's a crack on your basement wall, if you have a basement that is not finished, you can clearly tell that after a big rain or spring melt, water is kind of seeping in. You need to make sure you fix that before it gets really bad and damages, right? Water is the biggest enemy in your home. Make sure the water runs away from the home, right? You look around the foundation and make sure that it's sloped away from the home. It shouldn't be going towards the home, it should be going away from the home, okay? All of those things are preventative. We're also going to talk about uh, energy efficiency. And a couple of ways that we can improve the energy efficiency in your home. Okay, so you can upgrade. Upgrade is a key word here. You can upgrade windows, for example. If you have old windows that let in a lot of cold air or let out the heat, you want to upgrade those, right? You want to upgrade to LEDs, LED lights, right? Save energy there. You want a programmable, let's see if I get this right, thermostat. Nowadays they have something they call smart thermostats. A brand that I know of is Nest, right? It senses movement in the house, or is able to. So if it doesn't sense any movement, it will automatically decrease the heating, the temperature in the house because it's assuming nobody's home, right? So it's like it learns the movements in the house, so it will automatically warm the house up before everybody gets up, and then turn it back down when people leave, and then turn it back up when it knows or it's expecting people to come back. So it's kind of learning. Yeah, it's crazy. It's awesome. Maybe a little creepy, but it is what it is, right? It's learning uh, and saving you energy, right? You're not heating the home when nobody's home. Okay. All right, let's keep going. I'm about to start, just so you know, with the actual, but I always need you to have an overview. It's so much easier for you to understand if you know where we're going. What's the GDSR? right now I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to ask you to write it down, but it's the gross debt service ratio. And it basically, it's qualifying for a mortgage. Banks have ways to calculate whether or not you're going to qualify for a mortgage. They can tell, wait a minute, this mortgage is way too much for you. You're not going to be able to make the payments on it, so they might not approve it. They use the GDSR as part of their calculations. Okay, I have that. Energy efficiency is here. And the last big one here before I go on to the actual lesson is equity. Okay, equity, I want you to understand it this way. So let's say you buy a home for $200,000. Okay, just a nice easy example. So $200,000, what happens as soon as you start making payments over time, you will owe less on it. So let's say after 10 years, you only owe, right? 10 years, this is when you buy, right? 10 years later, you only owe 100,000. But what happened to the value of the home in those 10 years? So this went down, right? But the value of your home actually went up over time, right? So let's say after 10 years, this home is worth 300,000. So this is what we call equity. It's basically how much you would get if you were to sell your home today. So this person, after 10 years, if you sold after 10 years, right, you would sell it for 300,000, and obviously you'd have to pay the bank what you still owe them, right, 100,000. So $200,000 is your equity in this case. And so that is the biggest advantage of owning a home, is you build equity. When you retire, I'm not exaggerating, that if you buy a home when you're 25 and then you sell it when you're 65, it could be that the value of your home has tripled. I don't think that's a stretch, right? In that time frame, your home could have tripled in value, and that's all equity. That's all you just made that money by just owning the home. You didn't really do anything special, right? Of course, you took care of it. You did a lot of maintenance, all that, but you also built that equity. So when you're able to retire and you're thinking a home is too much for me, I'm going to now sell it and buy a condo where I don't need to, take care of the lawn and all of that stuff. And you can maybe use some of that also to, travel, some of the excess money to travel. Who knows? So that's what equity is. I need you to know that. I will add maybe, I think I'm just going to leave it like that. Yeah. Okay. Let's jump into our first lesson, finding monthly payments. That's basically what today is all about. I'm going to grab my highlighter here. So a mortgage is really just a loan, right? A loan towards real estate, right? That's what it is. And it's going to be over a specific time frame. It's called the amortization period, and at an interest rate that you're going to lock in on. So you got to understand, I'm going to try to make this as easy as possible. 99% of mortgages today, at this time, you're going to get a mortgage and you're going to finance it, you're going to amortize it over 25 years. Okay? Pretty much everybody does that. What is different is that what you probably didn't know before is you lock in, for most people, lock in for 5 years at a time. So you're basically saying, okay, I want to pay it off over 25 years, but you're locking in, you're guaranteeing an interest rate for 5 years for sure. So whatever happens to the market, you lock in at 5 years. Those 5 years come to an end, you want to sign again, you can sign in for another 5 years, and then when that comes to an end, you can do that again. You can repeat that until you get to the end of your 25. Why would you do that? I lock in because I don't like uncertainty. And I know that the interest rates are really low right now. So I like to keep it that way in case something changes. And most people are like that. They're like, if I can make my payment today, I want to keep it like that. However, if you're planning on selling your home within a year or two, do not lock in for 5 years because it's very expensive to get out of a term. Like it's just like a cell phone. Once you sign, you pay quite a bit if you want to get out of it, right? Out of that contract. So be aware of that. Okay, here we go. Monthly payment. By the way, vehicle finance is almost copy and paste in this case. So monthly payment, which we call the payment, right? Like that, PMT, is the amount borrowed times the table rate divided by 1,000. The amount borrowed is the price minus any down payment mentioned, okay? So just make sure you understand that the amount borrowed is price minus the down payment. This table rate is taken from obviously one of the tables that I'm going to use. Interest paid on the first month, we call that lowercase I, is mortgage owed times the interest rate, not table rate, divided by 12. This is copy paste from Viva Finance as well. Principal, it's when you take the monthly payment and you subtract the lowercase I from it, okay? To get your principal, you go monthly payment minus interest paid. Total interest paid, you take your monthly payment times 12 months, right? Times the number of years, that will essentially tell you how much you paid the bank in payments over the 20, 25 years, whatever, and you subtract it from the amount borrowed. And notice that amount borrowed is here and comes back here, okay? And technically, I should put this here. These three highlighted pieces, they're all the same number, okay, if you're dealing with a specific mortgage. All right, you're still there? You're still following? Hope so. Let me just fold this over. Okay. Amortization period, the length of time, right? Length of time in years that it takes you to pay off. Equity is also another way of equity, the portion of the value of your property that you own, right? There's a portion of that property that you actually own that would be yours after you pay off the bank. That's yours. You might own all of it, but so if you take your value today, if you were to sell it, how much of that would be yours? How much would you own of that? Okay. Interest is the finance charge. How much extra you paid to borrow the money? No news there. Principal is the amount borrowed, also called the mortgage amount. Okay. Unpaid balance is the portion of the value of property owed to the financial institution. Okay. Let's do some basic understanding here using very easy numbers. You buy a house worth $200,000 and you make a down payment of $25,000. How much is your mortgage? Well, my mortgage is actually taking the price of the house and subtracting your down payment from it. So the mortgage amount, the unpaid balance, you name it, It's the 175,000 that would be the actual mortgage, the loan you take out to buy that home. Okay. What's the equity in your property? At the time you take it out, your value hasn't gone up yet, right? So it is really just the 25,000 that you made a down payment for. That is what you own at that particular moment. Okay. The unpaid balance is therefore 175,000. It's your mortgage, but it's also your unpaid balance. You basically owe all of it still. Calculate the down payment as a percent. I need you to know how to do this because you need to know how much you would have down for a house, right? So if you saved up 25,000, it's like your test score. If I have this much out of the total, you multiply that by 100, right? So you'd go, this is what I have out of the total times 100, and that would give you that. And so you go 25,000 divided by 200,000, right, times 100, so that's 12.5%. Okay. 12.5% is the down payment you would have had in this case, right? Doesn't happen, that is not asked very often, but I felt like you needed to know. Okay. Types of mortgages. There are two main types of mortgages. I mean, the market, they always come up with fancy ways of calling something, but really it boils down to these two options that you're going to have. Most of you should, at the beginning, and the bank might even say you have to, depends on what your down payment is, a fixed rate mortgage, right? Fixed, it's locked, right? A mortgage with the interest rate unchanged for a specific period of time. It could be 1 year, right? 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's the common range you have to pick from. Yes, there are more, like some brokers will give you a longer lock-in, but then the interest rate goes up quite a bit because they're guaranteeing you a rate for a long time. Variable rate, right? Variable tells you, right? A mortgage where the interest rate may vary or fluctuate from month to month. Okay. So if you're comfortable with that risk, what are the pros of variable? Most of the time, it's going to be lower than what, let's say, a 5-year locking in is. Because if you lock in for 5 years, the higher the term, the higher the interest rate most likely, because you're guaranteed for 5 years. No matter what the market does, you're guaranteed that rate. If you go variable, you get a lower, but it could go higher at any moment, right? So it's a little bit of a gamble. And so let's say you're not planning, it's time to renew, right? So it's time to renew, and you're like, but I want to sell within 6 months. Well, then you should go variable. Do you get that part? You should go variable because then you can sell at any time. You can sell at any time if you're at a variable rate. You're not locking in, you're not signing, you're just like month to month. Fixed, you're signing, you're locked in, you can't just sell whenever you please. Okay, so that's the difference. Okay, all right, let's do some math here. I know that you'd probably like, just give me the numbers, give me the formulas, I'll plug it in and go. But I'm telling you these things because, right, I want you to make the right choices when it comes to buying a home. And I'm out of pencils here. There you go. I have another one here. Okay, example 1. You have a mortgage of $85,000 at 5%, amortized over 20 years. And I will make note, there's no down. There's no down payment here, right? Just make a note of that. So find the monthly mortgage payment. To get your payment, you take the price minus any down or the mortgage, right? And you multiply that by table rate divided by 1,000. This is exactly like vehicle finance. So we just have the 85,000, right? That's what we're getting. We're going to put the 1,000 here and get this from our table. So you basically match to get the table rate. We match 20 years and 5%. The interest rate and the years are going to tell you that. So we go on the side here. I start with my interest rate. I go to 5%. See here? And then I go over to 20 years. So 5, 10, 15, 20 years is right here. See? That's a 20-year column. So it's the 657. What's that 657, by the way? Watch at the top here. What you're seeing here is a blended payment of principal and interest per $1,000 of loan. So for every $1,000 you borrow, you pay $657 per month. And then, remember, this is over 20 years, right? So we go 657 here from the table, right? So we match 5% and 20 years. That gave us that 657, right? That's like if you match these two, you get that table rate right there. So you grab your calculator, you go 85,000 times 6.57, right? 85,000. I hit equal there, and then I go divide it by 1,000. So that's 558.45. And this is per month. I will circle that, and I will say per month. Every month over 20 years stays the same. So make that note. Stays the same. Once you get a monthly payment, until that contract is over, you're guaranteed that monthly payment, right? Find the total amount paid over the life of the mortgage. Okay, so I will do this. Total paid, you would go payment times 12 months. This gives you how much you would have paid in a year. So times that by the number of years plus any down payment that may have occurred. So this portion here is to the bank. So if the question just said, how much did you pay, total paid to bank, you would just focus on these three, multiply these three numbers here. Since it doesn't say to the bank, just for the life, you also have to consider the down payment if there was one. Okay, so in this case, the payment is $558.45 times 12 times, how many years did we talk about? It was 20 years. There was no down payment, so I'm just going to leave it at that. So you go 558 right, 558.45 times 12 times 20. Right, I type that in like that, and then I hit enter. 134.28. That's how much you paid back, paid for that mortgage over the 20-year stretch. So think about that. You started with 85,000, but you ended up paying 134,000 for that same house. It's the same house. So what happened between here and here? Well, interest. That's what happened, right? Everything, because the bank just wants, they want their 85 back and then some, right? That's the deal, right? That's how they make money. And you might say, wait a minute, that's a ripoff. I should have just saved it up for 20 years and then paid it off. Well, hold it. If you save up for a house. You're renting now. So you have to pay rent. And on top of that, the value of that house you want is going up every year anyways. So you will lose regardless of what you do, right? So at some point you just have to say, okay, I'm buying it because I know it's going to go up down the road. Find the amount of the first month's, so first month's payment, right? That goes towards interest. So they're asking for lowercase I, which is the 85,000. That's the amount you borrowed, times the interest rate. The interest rate is 5%, right? So that's 0.05. That's 5 divided by 100, right? That's how I got this. Divided by 12. Okay, so you take 85,000 times 0.05 divided by 12, and I get 354.17. Okay, that's the interest you paid in the first month. That's first month only, by the way. That will change the second month. Okay, so D says find the principal paid on the mortgage, the principal paid on the first month. Now, when you answer these questions, I want you to think of it this way. I always want you to think of the fact that the payment, which for us is, write this down on the side if you haven't done that. This is what our payment is. Every time you make a payment at any financial institution where there's interest, right, there is a principal amount and some of it that is the interest. Always. These two here always make up the payment. And in this case, we already calculated, it's kind of a little backwards, but we calculated this, and that's the first thing you need to do. So how would you get this? Well, you just subtract, right? If you subtract these two, you get your principal. If you had the principal and the payment, if you subtracted those two, you would get the interest. So principal of the payment is simply payment minus lowercase I. So 558.45 minus 354.17. A lot of it goes into interest the first month, but it goes down thereafter. So this is what you get. $204.28. So these two combined make up your payment. The payment never changes, but these two things change over time. I don't know if you remember the amortization tables. Did we do amortization tables? I'm pretty sure I did in vehicle finance. So one goes up and one goes down. Yeah, I'm very sure it was even on the test back then on the vehicle finance. Okay. E. You need to add this. Calculate the total interest paid. I want you to add that. Calculate the total interest paid. And that's what we call the TI. You go payment times 12 times years minus mortgage, right? Minus the mortgage. In this case, the payment is 558.45 times 12 times how many years? We're talking 20 years. Minus the mortgage in this case was 85,000, right? There was no down payment, so all of it became the mortgage. So we calculate this. I know we can borrow it from the previous, but I'm just going to do it like this. 134.28, you should recognize that number. We did that before. 134.28 minus 85,000. And I will just go ahead and subtract 85 from it. So $49,000 went towards interest. That is the bank's profit. Granted, that is over 20 years. But the bigger your mortgage amount, the more interest they make. And now imagine they have thousands of houses, thousands of mortgages on their client list. And so they're making some pretty good money that way. That's their way of making money. They take some and they lend it out. They make interest, right? They take the savings of people and invest it in your mortgage, and then they get a return, which they take some, but they also have to pay some to the people that are saving the money and invested it, right? Okay, so that's how you do that. One last example, and then you will be free to go. Okay, probably be done sooner than you would have been in class here. Yay, right? Hey, stop looking at YouTube, guys. Focus here. You can do that after. Okay, close everything else. All right. Example 2. You buy a house for $225,000. Let's highlight, right? This is how much you paid for the house or planning on paying. There's a down payment for $42,000. You're amortizing it over 25 years at 3.5%. You know that the years and the percentage will go together to give us that table rate. That's a guarantee. Okay. So find the mortgage amount, i.e., how much do you need to borrow, right? So the mortgage is taking a 225 minus the down payment. Okay, that's what you do. And so it's essentially your mortgage amount, the amount that the bank will borrow you, because you're going to take care of 42,000 of that price. That goes to the other owners. The bank comes along and gives the 183 so that the previous owner or the seller, let's say, gets their full 225,000. That's where the lawyers come in, by the way. The lawyers have a trust fund, and so their lawyer, so you have a lawyer and they have a lawyer. So it's a bit, we're going to talk more about that, but you give the $42,000 to your lawyer, who puts it in a trust fund, and then my lawyer gives it to the seller's lawyer, and then their lawyer gives it to them. So it kind of like goes through a secure loop so that the money can't just vanish, right? And then the bank comes along and gives the 183 to the owners or the seller so that they get their 225,000 total. Okay, so that's kind of how it works. However, if that kind of confused you, don't worry about it too much. We just want to make sure that we want the 183 because that's how much you're going to borrow from the bank to pay off the rest. So find the monthly payment. I will actually start from scratch here. I'm assuming that this wasn't even asked for. A didn't even exist. To get the payment, I got to go price minus down times table divided by 1,000. Okay, so I'm going to take the 225, subtract the 42,000, and I'm going to multiply that by a table rate divided by 1,000. This is what I want you to do, okay? Just write down this number, subtract it, and we already know it's 183,000. But just write it down right underneath because that's going to come in handy later on for the other examples we do. Now let's go get our table rate. And it is, right, 3.5% meets 25 years. Okay, so that's going to be our table rate that we're going to plug in here. So I'm going to go 3.5% here, and then I'm going to go all the way to the end where it says $4.99. Okay, so it's $4.99. I'm going to write it in here, but I'm also going to write it in here. That usually gets you a full mark, just getting that right. Okay, and now let's calculate that. And so the 183 is already there. So I'm going to go 183,000 times 4.99. I'm going to hit equals, and then I'm going to go divide it by 1,000, not 10,000, 1,000, 913.17. Some of you divide by 100 sometimes for some reason. And if you're ever not sure, the table tells you it's per $1,000 of loan. So that's why the 1,000 is there. And if you did 100, your payment would be 9,000, right? 131. That's too much a month. I don't make that kind of money. Nobody does, and I don't think so. Nobody in here does. If you do down the road, think of me. Just send me a little bit every month. Anyways, find the total amount paid over the life of the mortgage. Total paid over the life. It doesn't say to the bank. So I'm going to just take the 913.17 times 12. That's almost a given because that's how much a year is over 25 years plus the down payment, which is 42,000. So for the house, you paid all of this. I kind of like to have this in brackets like that. You don't have to. It would still work out. But then we go 913.17 times 12 times 25, and I'm going to write that down. Plus 42,000. That's 315,951. 315,951. Okay? And so that's how much you paid in total. To the bank, right? $913.17 times 12 times 25, which is just the 273,951. If it asks just to the bank, this is an aside, then it would just be the 273,951, right? We're almost there, guys. We're almost there. Find the amount of the first month's payment that goes towards the interest. First month, that should right away ring a bell. That's I is equal to, what number do I put in there? This is where you get it from. Go back to where you did your payment, and you got to make sure you subtracted the down, and that is the number you're going to plug in here. So 183,000 times the interest rate divided by 100. So 3.5 divided by 100. That gives you 0.035 divided by 12. You need to write it as a decimal, okay? And you gotta make sure that whatever you get here is smaller than your monthly payment. Okay, if that's not the case, you're doing something wrong. So it's 533.75. That's what this question is asking for. Find the principal paid on the mortgage. Principal on the first month's payment, right? We take our payment, right? We take our payment, and then we go minus the interest that we paid. And that gives us 379.42. This goes towards mortgage. Like when you're making your payment of 913, the bank says thank you very much, right? They shave off that, and they're like, okay, actually the 379 is what's going to go towards paying off the 183,000 that you owe us. So at first it's very much flipped, right? You pay a lot of interest, but over time, as the amount you owe them goes down, the payment portion of the principal portion of your payment goes up. And it, like towards the end, it's actually completely reversed. Okay, calculate the total interest paid over the life of the mortgage. That's TI, and that's really just taking your payment times 12 times, in this case, 25, minus your down payment. And I'm taking this straight from the previous page where we did one of these. And that's 273,951 if you multiply this, minus 42,000. And that is 90,951. I posted all of these things as a PDF. I would not recommend you print it because it's a lot of printing, and I have it. So I would say don't. So homework. Try this out. Page 1 on the worksheet booklet. So let's say this is what you definitely could do today. You can fill in the notes later when you get your booklet, but there's a PDF of this. It's called the worksheet booklet PDF. I posted it this morning. Go to classwork and then just do it on loose leaf. The answers, like this is what it looks like, right? The worksheets like this, just first page. There's a bunch of questions here. And the answers are down here. All the answers are down here, so you can actually just check right away if you're doing okay. Okay, so that's what it shouldn't take you that long. That way you have